Hello everybody and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I want to thank you guys for your patience over the last little while. I know I haven't exactly been keeping up with my channel, but there are some very good reasons for that. And I think probably the most prominent one in your minds right now is the Silmarillion Total War mod. For those of you who aren't aware of it, and I don't imagine that there's too many of you out there, but just for the benefit of those few who haven't heard of the mod before, it is a new upcoming mod being balanced for multiplayer and for a campaign as well. And I'm going to be working on the multiplayer side of it. And that is actually why I've brought you here today. We're going to be looking at a faction that I really just finished working on last night. It is one of the Orcish factions, and I'm going to go through the factions that we've got finished already leading up to a closed beta, so you should be able to see some gameplay relatively soon. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but on the faction side of things, it's been going very, very well and progressing very quickly. So the faction that I want to talk to you about today is the Gaurhoth faction. There's a few things that I want to go over, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the design behind the 4 different clans that you're going to see here in the service of what they call Gulkala. There wasn't exactly a word for Gaurhoth in Black Speech, and I decided on using Black Speech for this faction because I wanted to give them some really cool names, and because Sauron is actually in charge of this faction. So I realized that Black Speech in the first age is a little bit of an anachronism, as that's something that Sauron would create later once he assumed the mantle of Dark Lord. But it let me do some really cool stuff, and I actually made a lot of custom faction lore for Gaurhoth. And a lot of it comes down to as the 4 clans that make up the armies of Sauron in this period of time. So the first one that I want to show you today is going to be the lowest of the 4. They're known as the Hishtburkraz, or the Ashclaws in English. And they're the least disciplined but most numerous of the 4 clans of Gulkala. And since I don't think I explained this earlier, Gulkala is the Orcish word for Gaurhoth. It has nothing to do with werewolves, as Gaurhoth means Isle of Werewolves in, I believe, Sindarin. But Gulkala means the Witch Fort, as Sauron is a renowned sorcerer. And there's going to be a few kind of magical elements that you're going to see in this army, as well as, of course, Sauron being a magical smith probably isn't going to send his troops into battle without some sort of leg up over the elves, who are such a danger to Orcish armies. But in any case, I digress. The Hishtburkraz are nearly completely feral, not so much being deployed into combat as they are unleashed in the general direction of the enemy and set loose. Wherever they go, destruction follows, as the rage of the Hishtburkraz cannot be contained. They scorch the earth, drink the rivers dry, and fill them with filth. They are the burners of forests and the eaters of children. They clad themselves in dun raiment and smear the ash of slain captives on their bodies during bizarre and bloody rituals, giving them their characteristic deathly pale complexion. The expendable masses of the Hishtburkraz are known as the Howlers. Ravenous and slavering, they swiftly charge into battle with no thought for their own safety, desperate to slake their lust for blood and carnage. These expendable shock troops make up the bulk of the Hishtburkraz's clan's contribution to the armies of Gaurhoth. And then we're going to take a look at a few of the different units. They've all got a little bit of a short backstory behind them. So the first one that you're seeing on screen, and I've already talked about here, is the Hishtburkraz Howlers. They are shock troops. They are armed with axes, and in the mod, axes will have a slightly improved charge bonus over other one-handed weapons, so they're going to do a fair amount of damage off the charge. There's not a ton of them, and their armor values are very, very low, and of course they're unshielded. So these are very much a fodder unit. You can bring them in fairly large numbers. I won't go into specifics about what the unit size or caps are going to be just yet. That's something that we can talk a little bit more about later once things have started to be finalized. But the next unit we're going to look at is the Hishtburkraz Hunters. They are the scouts and foragers of the clan, screening the approach of the masses of clan orcs in a hail of arrow fire, softening their foes for the inevitable charge of the Howlers. These guys are a low-tier archer. Archers are going to function pretty well the same, I think, as you're used to in Reforged, although I am sort of taking this approach to missile units in general, wherein they have less ammunition, but they do a decent amount of damage. Less ammunition, although in the case of archers, they'll do a little bit less damage, I think. And part of that is because armor values and shield values are a little bit lower in Silmarillion Total War, whereas melee defense is going to be kind of the bigger stat there. So archers are going to do a little bit less damage. They'll have some less ammunition, but they will be a little bit more accurate in exchange. And the Hishburgras Howlers are, of course, going to have a large number of orcs in the unit. Moving on next, we have the Hishburgras Warband, and they are raiding parties of Howlers given a spear and a shield and sent into combat. The Hishburgras are nearly mindless savages, but they are possessed of a low animal cunning, and as such recognize the value of spears in warding off unfriendly cavalry. Very much a standard unit. They have it's actually the identical model to the orc fodder, I believe, from Mordor. And I chose all of these units because they have those like kind of spiky outcroppings, like the bows and the hunters are very spiky, and there's that like trail of spikes that goes up the spine of each of the orcs on these lighter units, and they're all like scraps of leather and chainmail. And I think it's really fitting for the fodder units that these guys happen to be. And then we move on to a slightly more elite version, but still that's not saying much for the Hishburgras clan. We have the Hishburgras Zalgulkalab, which is it's just the ash claws of the witch fort, essentially, with the B there denoting like a simple genitive case. And they are ash claw orcs mounted on the savage beasts that prowl in the shadows of Tolin Gaurhoth. These mounted raiders carry a clutch of ensorcelled javelins. This is the sorcery I spoke about earlier, which blaze with a dark inner fire. Burning the countryside to cinders, they roam and pillage. Enemies hit by this unique projectile are dismayed and suffer a morale penalty. And just let me clarify that a little bit for you. They will have a special projectile that is unique to this unit and unique to the Tolin Gaurhoth faction as well. And it is going to be a flaming javelin. And it's going to do a little bit of morale damage, and it'll set enemies on fire when it kills them, and it's just kind of a neat little thing that they have that gives them a little bit of character and sort of plays into their name. They are the Ash Claws, of course. They burn their victims alive and smear themselves in the ashy remains, so a fiery javelin is, of course, what they need to have, I feel. And from there, we're going to move on to the fearsome warrior clan, the Skarahai. And as I mentioned, the Skarahai are a fierce warrior folk. Unlike the Hishburgras, they are well trained and better armored, making them suitable for frontline combat. They form the medium infantry corps of the armies of Tolin Gaurhoth, and their contribution is indispensable. The reckless charge of the Ashclaws softens up the enemies, while the Skarahai finish the job once the whelps have been scattered. Even among the savage orcs of Tolin Gaurhoth, the wolf folk have particularly gruesome customs. They are hematophages, taking great pleasure in drinking the blood of the enemies they kill. The clan's victory feasts are the sites of horrifying massacres, where victims are ritualistically let and then thrown to bands of warriors while still living. Over time, their sanguinary inclinations have given members of this clan distinct ruddy countenances with crimson red eyes. And the first unit that we're going to look at today is the Laugskaraz Zagulkalab. And they are the mounted warriors of the Skarahai. Skarahai means wolf folk. Hai is probably a pretty common affix, I think, at this point that many people are used to. The Uruk-hai, things like that. Uruk meaning orc, so it's orc folk. Skara is wolf, so these are the wolf folk. And the Laugskaraz, it means dire wolves. So the dire wolves of the witch fort. And the Laugskaraz eschew shields in favor of greater speed and maneuverability, seeking to close the distance between them and their targets, and drain them dry for the glory of the clan. What the Laugskaraz lack in survivability, however, they make up for in close quarters punch. In melee, these ferocious warriors are effective against armor. And I want to clarify here, because there are going to be a couple different variants of the orcs of Tolin Gaurhoth, and their wargs are all going to do something different. So we've seen the Hishburgras wargs and their unique projectile. Next we have the more expendable version of the warg riders, the Laugskaraz. They're not going to have an armor-piercing charge. In fact, their charge probably won't get a whole lot done. Because, and this is partially gameplay reasons, and I've also reflected this kind of in the model itself, it's a little bit lighter They're not going to have the same sort of like weight behind their charge as the heavier unit that we're going to see a little bit later on. So they're going to have their charge will be all right. It's not going to have a ton of damage behind it, but once they get into close quarters, that's where they can really, really shine. They're going to be armor piercing in close quarters. It's going to be nothing for them to hack apart well-armored enemies, so elves and men would do well to whittle them down from afar before engaging these warriors in close quarters. Let's move on now to the next unit. We have the Blood Drinkers of the Skara High. And the Blood Drinkers are those members of the clan who have completely given themselves over to the bloodlust that is their birthright. These warriors fill their helmets with blood before donning them, and the scent drives them into a frenzy before battle, with the anticipation of the carnage to come. These guys are a two-handed shock unit. If you take a good look at them, you can see that there's that red eyes peering out from behind the visor. They're going to have a little bit more of like a crimson colored like chainmail and stuff, just because of the amount of blood that these guys deal with on a daily basis. Their skin itself, it's a little bit kind of whiter with a reddish tinge to it, and I've done this because Tolin Gaurhoth is also a home in the story to vampires, and vampires largely are they're something that I've never really seen much of. I think that maybe they're like big bats and things like that. But I thought I would do like a different take on it. So the first stage is a very, very distant past part of Middle-earth's history, and so that's the tales of vampires have been passed down over time, and they've kind of warped a little bit. So instead of like blood-sucking monsters, they're just really blood-hungry orcs that have these weird clan rituals where they like cover themselves in blood and drink the blood of their enemies because they believe that it makes them stronger, gives them power, that sort of thing. So I thought it was a cool little way to tie in that little detail that otherwise wouldn't have been represented in the faction. So that's why that's there. Moving on now from the Blood Drinkers, then we have the Long Fangs. The Long Fangs are the rank and file of the Wolf Folk. Sturdy, shielded, and reliable, they consolidate the gains made by the Blood Drinkers and the Ashclaw clan. They are numerous and well-armored, and the backbone of any Tolin Gaurhoth army. It's a pretty standard orc unit. You'll probably notice that it's the Angmar Marauder model from Angmar in Reforged. Como was nice enough to give me kind of free run of the place, and I can use any of the models that I would like to from Reforged and anything that I want to from his work, as long as I give him some credit for it, which he absolutely deserves because he makes amazing stuff. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward here. They're not armor piercing, but given that they are an axe unit, they will have a decent charge to them. And unlike most of the Tolin Gaurhoth units that we've seen so far, they're actually shielded. So they're one of, I think, 3 units that have a shield in Tolin Gaurhoth. You're probably sensing a theme here. They will be fairly vulnerable to missiles. They're going to be all about moving quickly, running things down with their wargs, engaging them with the Hishburkraz, and then following up with your heavier units once they manage to follow suit. Yeah, let's move on to the last member of second to the last member of the Skara High clan. No, actually it is the last. The Skara High Trappers. The Trappers are unique among the wolf folk in that they do not immediately rush into close quarters. The Trappers are a cannier sort and embody the concept of patient, measured aggression. These true hunters will only engage in melee once the enemy has been weakened with a deadly storm of javelins, and then they will move in for the kill, joining their packmates in the throng. And that's going to do for the Skara High today. And then we can move on to the higher tier units, and these ones are really fearsome looking, and again you're going to notice similarities between them and the Angmar faction. These are the Wolf Guard, or the Gijak Skaraz clan, which I believe means blood wolves, and they are these heavily armored warriors are the warrior elite of Tolin Gaurhoth, the best equipped troops that they can put into the field by the 4 clans in service to Sauron. The Gijak Skaraz are the warrior elite, as I mentioned, standing above the Hishburkraz and even the Skara High in the pack hierarchy. They take orders from nobody aside from the warlords of the Tharang Sheik, which is the Rage Howl clan, and Sauron himself. The first unit that you're going to see here is the Gijak Skaraz Chosen, and they are heavy spearmen designed to support the numerous mounted wolf units of Tolin Gaurhoth, or keep the pups of the Hishburkraz from fleeing at the first sign of trouble. Next, we have some mace infantry. These are the Wolf Guard of the Gijax-Skaraz clan, and they are mace-armed heavy infantry, ideal for answering the heavy armor of the Noldor of Mithlim or Nargothrond, who are both very close geographically to Tolin Gaurhoth, and do represent a serious menace to them. Although they are few in number, at least for orcs, if properly supported, the Wolf Guard are a force to be reckoned with. And then, of course, every clan is going to have their own mounted unit, and it wouldn't be right, I think, if the Gijax-Skaraz clan were neglected in that regard. And of course, they are not. The Gijax-Skaraz Zagul-Kalab are the largest and fiercest members of the clan who are able to tame the quote-unquote tame the monstrous wolves bred in the pits of Tolin Gaurhoth. More heavily armored than the expendable Laugskaraz riders, these warriors are better able to withstand missile fire and have a devastating armor-piercing charge. These are the higher tier units that I spoke about a little bit earlier. Because of their increased weight, both in the size of the orc riding the warg, and because of their heavier armor and armaments, they are going to have an armor-piercing charge. They will not, however, be armor-piercing in close quarters. They're just going to have a regular attack. And they're also going to be smaller than the Laugskaraz and the Hishburkraz riders, who tend to weigh in at about 75 men in a unit. These guys are just going to have 60. And it's worth noting that they're going to have a little bit lower shield value and armor values than the infantry versions, and there's a few reasons for that. Part of it is just bonuses that infantry are going to get. I'm trying to make this an infantry-focused mod, but cavalry will have a very, very important role to play. So don't worry about that. I've put a lot of thought into sort of the interplay between the stats here, and as I mentioned, melee defense is going to be a big stat, so rear charges will be extremely powerful since armor values are going to be lower. And the armor-piercing charge from these guys is going to be a big part of that. But yeah, so they're going to be a little bit lighter. They're going to have an armor-piercing charge. But one important thing to note about wargs in this mod is that I'm trying to cut down a little bit on the amount of 2 HP units that are present. So wargs will have just 1 HP. The Laugskaraz riders and the Hishburkraz compensate for this by having a little bit larger unit sizes. Most cavalry units are about 60 to 50, whereas those units are 75. And I don't mind telling you this because this isn't something I expect that is going to change unless like these units are completely useless with 1 HP. Whereas the Gijax-Skaraz Zagul-Kalab are going to compensate for the lack of the HP with higher defensive stats. So they've got really good armor, at least for the orcs of Tolin Gaurhoth by comparison, and they've got a decent shield value there as well. So yeah, that's pretty well it for the rank and file. I now have a couple of other units that I can show you. The final 2 units for the Tolin Gaurhoth clan are, of course, the Warlords of the Thrang Sheik, the Rage Howl clan, which I mentioned earlier in the description. I don't have any lore for these guys just yet, but I will follow up with it and put it on our ModDB page. So if you guys are interested in learning more about the Thrang Sheik, once I've had a chance to really work out the details there, then I recommend that you take a look at our ModDB. I'm going to put links and everything that you need down in the description. You can follow us on social media, but we'll get into that in the end in any case. So the Warlords of the Thrang Sheik clan are going to be a rare 2 HP cavalry unit. They're going to be a little bit smaller, probably weighing in at about 30 or so men there, and part of this has to do with the fact that they'll have okay armor. They'll have about 9 armor and like 6 or so shield or something, so they'll be reasonably survivable, but they're not going to be nearly as tanky as some of the Elven Knights that you're going to see in the game. And there's only one other Elven Knight. Knights are very few and far between. Unique units that are powerful like that have really been cut back in Silmarillion so that they can retain that uniqueness. And it's also, a balance concern. You don't want tons of Knights just running around ruining everybody's day. But yeah, the Wolfborn of the Thrang Sheik are very, very deadly. I'm going to use the Bolg's Champion model that you've seen in Reforged. They're going to have that lance attachment, an armor-piercing charge, of course, and they're also going to have a little shield value there that I used from the Black Uruks of the Mountain. So all this model here also belongs to Karen Koma. Thank you so much for letting me use it. But yeah, and now we have the final unit. This might be a little bit of a surprise for people, but I feel like this is a unit that needs no introduction. It's going to be Sauron. Sauron himself, Sauron the Cruel, will be taking to the field alongside his legions of savage orcs. One of the things you've probably noticed here is that there's no trolls in this orcish faction, which is pretty unique as far as orc factions go. I don't think there's a single orc faction that you guys are used to that doesn't use trolls in some form or another. And Sauron is kind of going to be the troll for the single entity troll for the Tolkien Gaurhoth faction. So yeah, that's going to be it for Tolkien Gaurhoth. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little faction spotlight. If you haven't noticed here, they're going to be very focused on their cavalry, swarm tactics, and they're very swift light infantry, kind of like holding things in place with and using their numbers to keep them there, and then smashing them apart with some of their more significant units like the Gijak Skaraz infantry and the various war units that they can bring to bear. So yeah, as I mentioned before, we've got a few ways of following along with the production of the mod. I'm going to put our Twitter down in the description there. You can also follow us on Instagram. And we've got our own Discord and our ModDB page as well. You're going to find links for that down in the description. I want to thank you so much to everybody who's been supporting us this whole time. It's a fairly ambitious undertaking to start it like this, and we've made just incredible progress. There's a few other factions that are already available for you guys to see pretty well in their entirety. And I'm going to do some faction spotlight videos for them as well. And those factions are the Elves of Assyrian. There's the Sons of Feanor, the House of Feanor, and God, who's the? Oh yeah, and then there's going to be the Guarded Realm of Doriath, which was made by Sin of the Dark Cloud. And the one other faction you're going to see before we start gearing up to release a closed beta for YouTubers and for our testing team and stuff, and that's where you're going to start to get to see some gameplay videos. That is going to be the Orcs of Angband. And they're going to be who I'm working on next, so that's probably going to be the next video that you see. But yeah, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Thank you so much for your patience and for supporting the mod, and I'll see you guys later. Take care, everybody.